Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining. I'm Mark Fletcher. I'm the Vice President of Public Safety Solutions at 911 Inform. Today's webinar will be dealing with some emotional and tragic incidents. Unfortunately, just a few days ago, similar events once again became a reality, and once again, lives were lost. Our goal here today is to educate administrators and staff in the hopes that awareness and planning can help avoid similar occurrences in the future. For all of us here, our thoughts and prayers go out to all the families affected. It's not uncommon for people to drive themselves to a hospital. Unfortunately, some can't make it further than the parking lot.
911, where's your emergency? 911, where's your emergency? Are you there? Do you have an emergency?
Yes. Can't breathe.
I need your address.
Park
I need your address, sir. What's your address?
Park Meadow.
Are you there? Are you still there? I need your address. What is your address?
I don't know.
Are you near the Park Meadow Hospital?
Yes.
Sir, just confirming, are you near the Park Meadow Hospital? Caller? Sir? Are you there?
In today's turbulent times, even our healthcare system is at risk. Threats need to be detected, isolated, and contained in order to protect patients, visitors, and staff.
911, where's the location of your emergency?
I'm at Park Meadows Hospital. A guy just pulled a gun out of his trunk.
Okay, Park Meadow Hospital. Sir, what's your name?
My name's Steven.
Are you safe?
I'm crouched in between two cars right now.
So as long as you're safe, I want you to stay on the phone with me. I just have a couple of questions I want to ask you. Where exactly at the hospital are you? I know you said parking lot, but which parking lot? There are many there.
It's the one by the pond.
Okay, so we do have folks that are on the way there. Me and asking questions is not delaying a response. But you said you're near the one with the pond. Are you able to see the gunman and tell me what he looks like?
I saw him for a second. He's wearing a big coat. He has blonde hair, and he's walking up the sidewalk to the front door.
Okay, so there's two front doors there. Do you know which one he's heading towards? And can you see any security folks at that entrance?
It's the only door I know. It's the front door, and there's a couple valets there.
Okay. And sir, do you know if he's fired any shots yet, or is he just walking towards the door?
He just walked in the door. I heard shots. Oh my God.
Again, these are unfortunate incidents, but they are a reality today. And once again, our thoughts and prayers go out to all those affected families out in Boulder, Colorado. What we're here to talk about is how emergency management for healthcare facilities can really make a difference. And every day that your staff does save lives. And we want to show you how you can enable a building to actually provide that. Let's go over some legislative changes that have recently come into play that affect all owners of what we call multi-line telephone systems, or MLTS or PBXs. The first is Carey's Law. And that went into effect last February, and that requires a direct access to 911 from any phone in the facility. I've got to be able to dial 911 without the access code. That call needs to go to 911. In addition to that, on-site notification is required so that your building staff is aware that that event's taken place. That went into effect February of 2020. In January 6th of this past year, that was actually strengthened further by Ray-Baum's Act. Ray-Baum's Act requires that a dispatchable location actually is reported to the public safety answer point, the 911 center, and it also needs to be provided internally. And that information needs to match and be the same. That applies specifically to wired telephone devices as of January 6th. And next year, that's going to apply to wireless devices that are capable of making phone calls as well. So laptops with soft phones on your Wi-Fi network, Vocera badges, SpectraLink phones, any 802.11 phone that's capable of making a call needs to be able to report that dispatchable location. And then something that's out there, not applicable to healthcare specifically, but applicable to the education market is Alyssa's law. And this requires a mobile panic button in schools, in K-12 schools. Now, as this becomes law in several states, there is federal legislation pending, and it's something to watch for because I believe that you're going to see this requirement in areas like hotels, potentially healthcare facilities. Fortunately, the technology that we're deploying for everything else, this is a very easy add-in to that, but something you should absolutely keep watching so you're aware of it. Talking about emergencies, it's all about detection of the event itself and capturing that, whether it's an internal 911 call, whether it's a code call in your hospital, a code blue, code red, code pink, code silver, whatever. There is workflow and interaction with other information that's applicable. We got patients dialing 911 calls. My food is cold. I haven't seen my nurse in an hour. Trust me, you know it happens all the time. On property calls, people with cellular devices that are making 911 calls on your property, you've got no visibility to that right now at all. It's not your device, it's not on your network, and you're not attached to the carrier network in a way that you can actually see that. And then we've got IoT, Internet of Things events, temperature sensors going out of range, smoke detectors, etc. Because of all of this information being located within the enterprise network, it's all very visible to a command and control platform. And if we know the device location, which is easily discovered from standard network discovery forensics, we can understand where phones are, where panic buttons are, where any device that's got network connectivity, we can understand the location of that device so we can then apply specific workflow based on that location. And this is technology that's good for Carey's Law compliance, good for ray bombs, great for code calls, and it's great for events like active shooters. We know what to alert and where to alert that, making the command and control of that. Workflow is really the critical piece, and it's intelligence based on location. Whether we're firing off door locks, locking, unlocking, whether we're accessing video cameras and making that available to internal responders or packaging it up and actually sending it to public safety. That's a very possible reality with the technology today. Or we're just using additional workflow by detecting an event. Let's say we have 888 as a code pink code available on any telephone device in the entire facility. If I see a code pink, someone running down the hallway with a child that's not supposed to be, I dial 888 from any telephone and I trigger a workflow. Number one, I turn that into a 911 call if you want, and we send that information directly to 911, and they know they're responding to a code pink. They know it's in the East Wing. So they know when they respond what they're going there without mentioning a word to anybody. Also, in-hospital staff can be alerted. Someone dialed the code pink code from this location. Let's lock the doors. Let's start recording the video cameras. Let's alert security. Let's put a plan of action in place. whether it's a code blue, a code pink, a code silver, it's an indication, and you've turned every telephone device into a potential panic button just by dialing specific access codes. Another thing that we can start talking about is Geofence Alerts. Cody is going to show you some great technology that uses what we call geofencing. This quite simply is an imaginary line on a map that delineates your property and your buildings. Now that map lives in the cellular network. And because of new technology that's deployed, that covers about 93% of the population in the US, that a 911 call from a cellular device that falls inside of your geofence, the technology is available that alerts us to that event and to the location. So now someone dialing 911 from your parking lot can be alerted. Somebody dialing 911 from inside the hospital, a patient room, can be alerted. And you get that indication. 80% or 85% or more 911 calls actually originate from cellular devices. Out of the 240 million calls that happen each year, 80 to 85%. So even with a solution that's capturing IoT events and panic buttons and 911 calls, you're addressing 15% of where these calls could be coming from. Everybody carries a cell phone today, and seconds count. Legacy 911 is very crude in its presentation to public safety. This is actually a screenshot of what a typical 911 dispatcher gets when someone dials 911. And that yellow and red line there, I've got highlighted in color because that's what we call address line 2. That's 20 characters to maybe 30, depending on the local database, of text information that you can provide to 911 to indicate where in your huge facility the 911 call is coming from. That's not a lot of text. That's not a lot of space. So this is problematic. Next generation 911, fortunately, provides a multimedia IP-enabled infrastructure so we can start applying building floor plans on top of a Google Earth view map. So I can see the parking lot, I can see the entrances. I understand that the phone in room D has dialed 911. Or if it was a cellular device, I'm going to get a circle of accuracy of where that device is. And by the way, with the modern device-based handset location that's available through the RapidSOS network, which we'll also talk about today, that accuracy is 1 to 3 meters. That's pretty good. Today, in the legacy 911, you might be talking 350, 400 yards of accuracy where that device is. Very difficult to actually locate those. So we utilize this new technology to get this multimedia. So I want to turn this over to Cody, who's going to go through an example of some of the technology that we're talking about here, and show you an example of what we do and the use cases and how we apply our technology. So Cody, I pass the ball over to you. You should be able to share your screen. Great.
Awesome. Thank you, Fletch. Really appreciate it. Want to confirm, Fletch, can you see my screen?
Absolutely. Looks beautiful.
Perfect. So I want to walk through a couple different scenarios today and show you what that looks like, what all of this technology, how we bring that into a single pane of glass, to alert you of a variety of different types of emergencies, whether it's coming from a 911 call off of your PBX, from a cellular 911 call, or some of those other detection systems that can dictate emergencies. As IoT continues to expand, chances are 911 calls are not going to be the only thing that determines emergencies within your facilities today. So what you're looking at on my screen right now are floor plans that we create or digitize of your specific facilities. So in this case, a large hospital. And as you can see in this example here, we are outlining a variety of different things on this map. In this case, we're highlighting emergency room 4, which is the location of where this 911 call is coming from. I'll go into that here in a little more detail in just a second. But also on these floor plans, we're casting where those AED locations are, where any other relevant emergency detail is located, as well as providing access routes so that when public safety arrives, they know it doesn't make sense for us to necessarily go through the lobby when that emergency is happening back near a back door, and we can get there much quicker rather than running through that entire facility. So in this case, what I'm showing is a 911 call originating off of a PBX device. The second that 911 call gets placed, what we are doing is sending out emergency notifications to anyone within your organization that that call has taken place with the precise location data. Now that satisfies the Carey's Law compliance piece of that on-site notification, as well as the Ray Bombs Act, as Fletch alluded to earlier, providing that additional location detail. You can no longer just send the address of the hospital. In those large facilities, public safety and first responders are going to get lost trying to locate that caller unless they have relevant information. So you look back to the 20 to 30 characters of information that Fletch had up on his screen earlier. Trying to explain to someone in one of your large facilities where you are located in 20 to 30 characters, unfortunately, is going to cause a delayed response. Instead, what we are able to do is cast this exact floor plan through RapidSOS, which Frank will cover here in just a second, into that 911 ecosystem to make sure that the telecommunicator and any resources that are being dispatched have access to that. At the same time, internally, we're also sending out those text, email, or desktop notifications, and I'll go ahead and share my phone screen here just so you can see that as well, saying, hey, there's an emergency within your facility, specifically in the emergency room 4. And the second I click on that link, it's going to launch me into that browser to show me that same data on my telephone or smartphone or tablet device. It's accessible from anywhere. This is all cloud-based technology. And I want to make a point that you do not need an application to access it. So you're going to get those notifications out to your internal on-site teams, whether that's security, whether that's administrative staff, or simply the front desk, making sure those individuals that need to know an emergency is happening are getting that information the second 911 is dialed, as well as getting it to public safety. Now, in this case, I know I'm showing that emergency in, or 911 call in emergency room 4 coming from a PBX device. Chances are today, as Fletch had said, a patient is not going to stand up and grab that phone off the wall if something's going on. What they're going to do is pull that cell phone out of their pocket and instead dial 911 that way. And that brings in that geofencing component that he was covering there earlier. We create that geofence around the entire boundary of your property. So whether it's that individual patient in emergency room 4 that dials 911 from their smartphone device, from the device hanging from the wall, or anywhere else on that property, we're also able to alert you of that with that degree of certainty, typically ranging around 3 meters of accuracy. So you'll know, hey, this is a 911 call from the PBX or a 911 call from that cellular device with that location data. And you can determine if that patient was just calling because they haven't seen their nurse in 2 hours, or their food was cold, or they haven't received their medicine yet, at which point you can communicate back and forth with the responders and with that public safety team, and I'll go into that here in just a second. But all this is about immediacy of information, making sure you know exactly where those emergencies are taking place the second that they happen. So I'm going to go ahead and spin up another alert to show you kind of that scenario we saw in one of those videos at the beginning there. So I'm going to spin up a 911 call as well. Let me go ahead and pull this up on my screen here. And what I'm simulating in this case is a 911 call happening in that parking lot of the facility, because again, our ties into that 911 ecosystem. We're not just pulling data from devices on your network. We're built in, the software is operating on the native operating systems of any smartphone device today, so that you don't need to know who someone is. They don't need to be in a database somewhere. If they simply take that smartphone device out of their pocket and it falls within that geofence area, if they were to dial 911, you're immediately getting notification of that call. So you can see that red circle highlighted here along the right-hand side. What that then also does is opens up a bidirectional communication platform between you and public safety. You look at 911 calls today, and unfortunately, it's a one-to-one relationship, right? The person dialing on one end and the person answering on the other end at that 911 center. Previously, you weren't receiving that location data, so that gets you that notification that, hey, 911's been dialed from your property the second that it happens. But two, what it also does is opens up a dialogue between you and that PSAP. So if I were to expand these comments along the right-hand side here, in just a second, you'll see that this is a heart attack, or whatever additional information they want to send in that emergency to make sure your teams are aware of it. So on my other screen here, I'm going to type heart attack. And this is simulating, hey, at the PSAP level, this is what they're getting from that caller. And now you know that internally you need to trigger XYZ response to go help that individual, because unfortunately, in a lot of cases that we've seen, this has happened in numerous hospitals around the country. Someone gets to the facility, but unfortunately, they just don't have the power to get themselves inside that building, and they revert back to dialing 911. With this, you're going to know about it the second that call is placed. You're going to get that location data, and then you can communicate back and forth with the PSAP. So once you see that, hey, this is a heart attack, you can respond back and say triggering XYZ response or resources on their way. So with that, again, it brings all of that back into the equation. It's not just solving for that compliance piece, which is 15 to 20% of the issue. It's bringing in 100% of those 911 calls. And again, this is all traveling through that next generation 911 ecosystem. I want to spin up one other type of emergency that brings in a variety of other technologies as well. So what I can simulate here, I'll simulate another 911 call happening from the front lobby of that facility, but this could just be another trigger in the system. I know we're talking a lot about 911 calls, and what we'll see later is some artificial intelligence that can ride on top of your existing IP camera infrastructure and a variety of other IoT devices. So we can pull those in to create a single pane of glass. Today, it's not just 911 calls that dictate those emergencies. There's a variety of other triggers that can happen. And so with that, I'll go ahead and spin this up, and you can see again that marker moved down to the gift shop here saying, hey, there's an emergency happening at the front of that building. Now with this platform, we can tie into all of your existing infrastructure in your facilities, things like your IP video surveillance, your door access control, paging or PA systems, message boards, and a variety of other technologies, both to pull in trigger events as well as to pull in additional data that's going to be necessary during the course of that response. So let's say you get that call, you're immediately notified via text, you get that pulled up on your device, whether it's a computer, cell phone, or any other device you're accessing it from. The second you look at that, it's going to bring you into this platform. And let's say I want to see what's going on in that facility. I can simply click on that camera icon, and that's going to launch a live view into what's happening specifically in that environment. Now, I'm sitting in Denver, Colorado right now. This at our headquarters in New Jersey. This video is under 1 second of latency on average. Again, it's on top of your existing infrastructure. It does not require that you go out and purchase new video systems or some of the additional technology I'll go into. Well, let's say you click on that camera and you see a fight breaking out in that lobby or something going on where you want to trigger an additional type of response or procedure. Simply with the click of a button, and these are all customizable based on your facility's procedures laid out today. With the click of a button, you can do things like lock down your facility, trigger a cardiac emergency, or code blue, code pink, whatever those types are that you already have set today. So let's say I wanted to lock down this facility based on what I was seeing. With the click of that button, what that can do is automatically lock all exterior doors to the facility. It can cast a message over that PA system and cast that message onto message boards throughout the facility, sending out alerts via text and email to all staff saying, hey, XYZ is going on. Here's what you need to do in order to keep everyone safe. Now, when public safety arrives on scene, you obviously don't want to keep them locked out of that facility for long. You want them to have access to some of that technology too, both from a situational awareness aspect as well as from an access standpoint. So they then have access based on classes of service to do things like view those video cameras that I just showed, or lock or unlock those doors so they can get access into that facility. And that's all accessible from any of those devices. Again, I'll go ahead and drag my phone back over and zoom in just to show you what that looks like. So I could zoom in here and click on that other camera to get a different angle of exactly what's going on. This is just of one of our data centers. Or I could click on one of those doors and unlock that door directly from this device and then lock it up behind me. And we understand people going into a threatening situation aren't going to be carrying devices with them, but what they will be doing is radioing back to either the security operations center, security desk, or to a command center from a public safety standpoint who's going to be partaking in these actions on their behalf, making sure they have access to anywhere in that facility that they need access to. What's great about this is it logs every action in the system down to viewing video cameras, locking or unlocking doors, that dialog box I showed you on the right-hand side of the screen earlier. So after that emergency is over, all of this data gets wiped off the devices, which I'll show you in just a second. But you can go through and print a detailed timeline report showing exactly who took what actions and at what time those actions were taking place. So you're not going back after something happens trying to go off of paper-based records or trying to remember what was said over the radio and what was communicated to you. You're going to have a record copy of all of that data. And taking that one step further, I know a lot of healthcare facilities that I've talked to recently are now requiring that they do drills on a quarterly, biannual, or annual basis for a variety of different types of emergencies. The system can be flipped into drill mode so that you can run those drills either on a tabletop or an organization-wide scale, engaging those public safety teams, so that now, one, you have that same report that was printed for live emergencies, except from a drill perspective, proving that you've gone through all of those different procedures that you need to. But two, more importantly, you can figure out where you need to improve. So if and when that emergency does happen, everyone is fully prepared to take action. Now, one thing I want to point out here, I'm going to drag this phone screen out so it's out of the way. All this technology is only accessible during that emergency. So from a privacy standpoint, I realize not everyone wants to grant 24/7 access to their video surveillance, door access control, or other technologies inside of that building. So what this does is it sends out a unique URL to all of those individuals engaged so that they can access it during that emergency. But the second that emergency gets resolved, it gets closed out down here in the bottom right, and it wipes all that access from the devices. So you don't need to worry about someone being able to access your technology when there's not something going on within your facility. It gives them full control based on class of service, whatever you want to grant them control to. But the second that emergency is closed out, it removes all that access. So you don't need to worry about Big Brother watching you 24/7. Now, I know a couple other points were brought up through this as far as additional emergency triggers. We've tied in with a variety of different systems, and I know Jay is going to discuss visibility here in just a second. Infrastructure that rides on the cameras, artificial intelligence there. We can provide panic buttons and a variety of other trigger emergencies, whether it's temperature control units and things like that. So it really creates that single pane of glass at the end of the day to make sure everyone's aware of any emergency. You're not trying to manage 5 or 6 different pieces of software. It's all accessible from one piece of software that's ran through the web, so you're not downloading a variety of different applications to access that information. With that, I'm going to turn it back to Fletch, unless Fletch, you'd like to add any additional commentary here.
No, that's fine, Cody. And just the only thing I want to add is the other problem that we didn't really touch on with the legacy E911 records, where we're trying to use that to get information, in addition to those records being limited to 20 to 30 characters, there's a level or a concern of immediacy because of the mechanisms used to get those database records updated. They're often only updated in batch form on a nightly basis. So if someone has moved or something has changed during the day, the entire day goes by without that being submitted. And once that does get submitted, it can be 24 to 48 hours to actually update that information in the database. So it becomes very stale very quickly when you have devices or information that's dynamic in nature. And that's why the next generation really makes a big difference in what we can put together here. So let me, I want to show you a couple of examples of what we saw before, the two scenarios, and how that changes when we apply a little bit of technology with that.
911, where's your emergency? Do you have an emergency?
Yeah, I can't breathe.
I now have your cellular location and name. Are you Michael Brown?
Yeah.
Are you in the northeast corner of the parking lot, Michael?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Units and hospital staff have been dispatched to your location. Stay on the line with me. Do you understand?
Yeah.
So obviously, if you know about an incident, you can respond to an incident. And there have been cases in the past where people have, had some serious impact by not being able to make it the last 50 feet, but they have dialed 911. And obviously, with the more critical active shooter situation, this is where prevention can really come into play. And I want you to pay attention to the video cameras, because that's the next technology we're going to talk about and what role that those devices can play in prevention.
Where's the location of your emergency?
I'm at Park Meadows Hospital. A guy just pulled a gun out of his trunk.
Okay, I see, sir, that your name is Stephen Brogan. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And your location is in the north parking lot, looking like you're near the pond?
Yes, that's correct.
Are you in a safe spot, Stephen?
Yes, I'm between two cars.
Okay, I want you to stay where you are as long as it's safe to do so. I've dispatched units. Hospital security is aware, and they have the hospital on lockdown. So don't come out of your hiding spot until it's safe to do so.
So obviously a little bit of technology, a little bit of detection, and a terrible, terrible situation, can be averted. So I want to dive deeper into this technology, this really amazing technology that's now available. And Jay Hutton is with VSBLTY. And hopefully he brought a couple of vowels along with him for the company name. But I'll turn this over to Jay, and he'll go through and show you some pretty amazing technology. So Jay, you should have control of the webinar. You can go ahead and share your screen when you're ready.
Okay, here I go. Stand by.
There you go.
Okay, thank you. My name is Jay Hutton. I'm the CEO of VSBLTY. Mark correctly commented that we are without vowels, VSBLTY. I'm old and been around the software business for a long time, but I am told when we named the company that was extremely cool. And I'm going to hang on to that because even though I have no ability to challenge it, it is what the 30-year-olds in the company think is a really cool name. I'm actually really excited to live in a time when we've got the ability to use the increasing power of computers to provide real human benefit. It's an exciting time, particularly, frankly, in this arena, in places where we can have substantial impact on human lives and human safety. I've been around software for 30 years of my life, and we've now reached a point that those of you that might remember Gordon Moore and Moore's Law, where processors were doubling in speed and halving in cost every 3 or 5 years, we've really reached a point where computers can actually interpret video streams live and predictively more effectively than human beings. And it's rather exciting. Certainly there's a gray area around it. We get a little bit concerned about the rise of the machines, but I tend to want a glass half full point of view on this. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how computer vision can be applied to increase the safety of hospitals, offices, schools, anything with a protective that's necessary for protective perimeter. First of all, what is computer vision? It's a fascinating area because what it does is it builds algorithms, and algorithms are meant to detect certain things. An example would be determining the difference between a male and a female, the difference between a 35-year-old and a 45-year-old, the difference between happy or sad. These are all analytics that we use in our retail business, and you can imagine the value of that with respect to measuring the performance of an advertisement or something like that. But in the public safety domain, the algorithms that we find very useful are things like weapons detection, facial recognition, persons of interest that have been identified and enrolled in a database. These are not you and me, not everyday people. This is not Big Brother. This is people that have represented threats to an organization, building, or an environment. Car accidents, license plates of note. So these are all computers that are able to interpret video streams. Here's the enormous pivotal shift that is happening in security. And this is why Fletch correctly points out this is the rise of computer vision in the next 10 to 20 years. Historically, CCTV cameras were about forensic investigation, putting the horses back in the barn after the horses have escaped. We've now moved to a point where computer vision can identify things proactively, and we can prevent, not just investigate. I can teach a computer to interpret video streams to look for things like in this case, a rifle or a person of interest. I can do this on perimeter cameras. I can do it on internal cameras. And because we've advanced to the point as an organization where we can select what each camera is designed to look for, we can do other things that provide not only security benefit, but other benefit. It occurs to me that I think about these very significant and tragic active shooter events at schools and other locations, and I think to myself, how would the emergency response be impacted if the emergency responders could have those cameras internal to the building identify weapons? So as the shooter moved through the building, what if the cameras were live and could be proactively identifying a weapon? One of the biggest problems when it comes to emergency response, especially in an active shooter event, is where's the shooter? Is he on the east wing or is he in the west wing? So sometimes people tragically die in situ, in place, because the responders cannot proactively and safely clear the building. But what if you understood, because you had access to camera vision and you had access to artificial intelligence, which was proactively identifying where the shooter may be, you could identify the shooters in the east wing, therefore you evacuate the west wing. So that sort of thing creates an amazing opportunity, and I think will lead very rapidly to the significant savings of human lives. So the other thing about computer vision, and for us the brand name is Vector, is we do other things as well. We measure the number of people that come into a building. We identify, for the purposes of perhaps a loyalty application, we can identify a VIP watch list, and we look for and can identify specific objects. The camera can identify specific objects. In the case of a retail establishment, that may be an object that is not a weapon, but of course in a security application, weapon is the most common. And a good place where we're beginning to see adaptation of our technology is in the Las Vegas area, where they're extremely security aware. A quick point on this is that we've learned as we evolve our camera vision that up above cameras that are 10 meters in the air are less effective at identifying facial recognition and weapons than cameras that are at eye level. So we're evolving camera placement to both achieve an overhead surveillance view and a eye level artificial intelligence view. So computer vision is good for things like weapons detection, as I mentioned before, facial recognition, as I mentioned before, but here's the important piece about visibility, not just us, but some of the category that's involved in this category. We can take a video stream from one camera, from 1,000 cameras. It doesn't matter. The software doesn't fall over when it starts to take up more camera feeds, but we can deliver multiple outcomes. We can look for weapons, we can count people, we can look for certain attributes in public space. And all of this is about providing a security perimeter or more information, not only to prevent the event from coming, because as Cody correctly pointed out in his previous discussion, we can connect the alert, the identification of either a person or a weapon to a specific series or workflow. An example might be the lockdown of a building. Other things that we're doing, because the camera is capable of doing multiple things at once, looking for weapons, looking for persons of interest, identifying plates that are license plates that have been identified with specific nefarious activity, real-time parking lot capacity, even though that's not a security component, that's an operational component, and others, other entities inside the organization will be interested in those things as well. The last comment I want to make just in the last 2 slides is the fact that we're beginning to see rapid deployment of smart cameras through what they call smart cities. The biggest one for us is in Mexico City, where 40,000 cameras are being deployed to create not only public utility, traffic counting, congestion counting, but also identifying persons of interest and weapons and that sort of thing in public spaces. Thank you. I'll turn back to you, Fletch.
Great. Thanks very much. Do appreciate it. So if you can just give me presenter control. There we go. That's appreciate that. So, in doing this, we look at the network technology. Let me just hang on one second. If you can just pass the presenter back over to me.
Sorry, I just did. There you go. Sorry.
Okay, great. Got that. Thanks very much. So the network that makes all of this possible, today the legacy E911 network is a very analog-based technology, and it's just not capable of passing intelligent IP-enabled information. The first problem where we saw that was with smartphones. If you've listened or read the news, cellular telephones pose a huge problem to 911 because they can't accurately be located. People are under this impression that because of the GPS, they could be very, very accurately located. But the fact of the matter is, it was not really GPS being used. It was kind of a radio triangulation between the towers. So Frank Millis is going to talk about the connected buildings and the RapidSOS network on the back end of that we use to deliver all this. So Frank, I'll turn it over to you.
Oh, thank you so much, Fletch. I appreciate it. RapidSOS. We are now what's known as a standard of care within 911 centers. We're installed at over 4,000 911 centers across the United States, and we're now getting about 20 success stories every single day. So everybody on this call should think of their cell phone as a life-saving device. There are no apps required for this. So let me go back to we talked about it briefly, the traditional way of locating cellular callers. So in the past, when you dialed 911 from a cellular device, it would depend, the accuracy would depend on the number of towers and your proximity to the towers. So it would compare the radiuses, it would overlap those, and then it would give 911 what's known as an uncertainty radius. In other words, it could be a 50 meter uncertainty. It could be thousands of meters, depending on the number of towers. The key here, it's called phase 2 triangulation, is that takes 25 to 30 seconds. So we've all heard saving seconds save lives. With the traditional 911 approach, when you dial 911 and they answer the phone, that phase 2 process starts. Imagine if the caller can barely talk, they're starting to go unresponsive, they can't breathe. That 30 seconds could be the difference between life and death. Okay, so what we've done at RapidSOS, and if you can go to the next slide, Fletch, we basically, when you went out and got your shiny new cell phone, let's say at the Verizon store, when you selected your plan, it came up and it said, hey, here's your plan. Do you accept, yes or no? In that agreement that you said agreed to, basically, it states that if you dial 911 from your smartphone, it will give your location to first responders, and that's key. Even if your location services are turned off in iOS or an Android phone, during the duration of that call, that 911 call, it turns these location services on. It's called Device-Based Hybrid, or DBH. So what that means is that the cell phone is now providing the phone's GPS, which is more accurate than cell phone towers. If you're attached to a Wi-Fi access point, or if you're near a Bluetooth beacon. It can also provide the phone's accelerometer, its step counter, its fall detection, or barometric pressure, which is an approximate altitude reading, showing that you, as an example, might be 15 meters in the air, which indicates it's a multi-story building. What's interesting is that when you dial 911 from your smartphone, this data is sent in sub-second response time. So think about that. Instead of it taking 30 seconds for 911 to know your location, they have the location before the phone even rings at the 911 center. So it displays on their map, which is the next slide. This is what the 911 centers see. It's called the RapidSOS jurisdiction view. So there's a highlight of the entire county or the jurisdiction they cover. Those pins represent live 911 calls. There's also data windows that can fly out if there's any additional data. Let's say if it's an Uber ride, or if that person has a medical alert bracelet, it can give them their name, their medical conditions, emergency contacts, etc. Those pins are also being pinned. So every 3 to 5 seconds, if the caller's running, if they're driving in a car, you'll see those pins in motion, or the 911 center will see those calls in motion. Now, down towards the bottom of that display, there's a red outline. It says Keene University. That's essentially the micro geofence. That micro geofence is what activates 911 Inform. So if there's a caller within that micro geofence, a 911 call, RapidSOS automatically activates the 911 Inform system, which is the next slide. So in this case, this is a simulation of a Mayo Clinic facility here in Jacksonville, Florida. So if somebody's in the parking lot, as we mentioned in one of the videos earlier, let's say they drive themselves, they're having a heart attack, they can't get out of the car. Who are the best first responders? The best first responders are your security and medical teams that could be 150 feet away, but today they have no awareness that that caller is there. What 911 Inform does is it gives them that awareness. You can get there faster than, let's say, EMS, law, or fire can. So in this case, you see the red micro geofence. It automatically activates with a 911 call so that your staff is immediately aware. And as Fletch mentioned earlier, with the code pinks, the smartphones can also be used as panic buttons. So the cell phone is a life-saving device, and RapidSOS is proud to be able to help 911 and first responders to save more lives. So with that, I will turn it back over to you, Fletch.
Great, appreciate it very much. So you can see that, you know, we've introduced a lot of new and cool technology here. And what I forgot to mention earlier is if you have any questions, if you'll use the GoToWebinar control panel that you have, and you can put any questions that you have into the question tool there. We've got some questions that were asked already. So I'll start with Cody. Cody, how long does it take to deploy this technology? It seems like a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So a lot of it comes down to what is being configured and integrated into the system. I will say it's surprisingly faster than the majority of clients think that we've worked with in the past. I know recently we just deployed a campus environment with 7 different buildings on that campus, tying into a variety of different technologies. And that deployment only took a couple days on site. Now there is a planning stage where we gather that data to digitize the floor plans and everything prior to that. But as far as on site integrating to the various technologies, it is fairly quick. And we've spent the last few years tying into a variety of systems to make that easier and easier, and building out integration notes as we go. So with that, we've gotten our deployment time down significantly.
Great, appreciate it. And here's one for Jay. Jay, your technology looks pretty amazing, but we just updated our cameras. Do I need to change my cameras again to work with visibility?
No, we were, I think, prudent enough to recognize that we'd be addressing a legacy install base. So if you bought a camera in the last, I don't know, 8 years, it's probably an IP camera capable of what they call an RTSP feed, real-time streaming protocol. If you give us an RTSP feed, we can do something with that RTSP feed. So it basically makes most of the marketplace available to us.
Okay, no, that's fantastic. And here's one for Frank. Frank, how do I find out if my local PSAP is RapidSOS capable?
That's an excellent question, Fletch. Right now, RapidSOS, like I said, we cover 4,900 PSAPs. Predominantly, those 911 centers are the major counties, the major cities across the United States. And we are now working more towards the rural areas. It's where they may have 1 or 2 dispatchers in a very rural area. So that's the other 8% coverage that RapidSOS is now working on. The best thing for somebody to do is simply to call your local law enforcement center or comm center and ask them if they're using the RapidSOS technology.
Okay, great. Next one is Cody. This one's for you. With COVID-19, we've sent a lot of people working from home. How can your location detection work for my at-home users?
Yeah, absolutely. Work from home has brought on an interesting environment from a compliance standpoint, pointing back into that Ray Bombs Act specific legislation, where you do need to send the correct dispatchable location to the correct PSAP if 911 were to be dialed from your MLTS or PBX device. With that, we can track both internal to the organization as well as external. So if you were to send employees home with either soft phone clients or physical phones sitting on a desk, you want to make sure that if that phone were to be picked up and someone were to dial 911 off of it, that it is going to go to the correct PSAP. As Frank had mentioned, there's around 6,000 of them across the U.S. So you do not want to be sending that just to the PSAP local to your facility, but instead to the PSAP that is going to be able to respond to the emergency location appropriately. So we can handle the routing and location data, whether it's inside one of your facilities or in that work from home environment.
Okay, great. Let's see. Here's a good one for Jay. I've got, what really interests me was the recognition of items and faces. And you mentioned license plates. Can I import a list of banned license plates and find out when they enter my property?
And that's precisely the application. Exactly that. So it's typical for an environment where you've got a contained area, a parking structure. Sometimes you'll see it used for tolling, on toll highways. But most commonly, it is precisely the application just defined. We have a database, we enroll known license plates into that database, and then we do real-time matching. And if we identify a match, we found that plate at this location, we'll perform a workflow, an alert mechanism of some kind.
You know, that's really interesting. So I can see a license plate is pretty static and probably pretty easy to read because it's a produced piece of material. But when you're doing facial recognition, the first thing that I started to question is how fast can you find me out of a database, and how big can that
Yeah.
database of people of interest actually be and still be effective?
Well, comparing facial recognition as a known and sort of mature technology to license plate recognition as a known and mature technology, license plate recognition is middle-aged and approaching old age. And facial of course, we're applying an AI component to it that wasn't around before, but facial recognition is considerably harder. If you think about the dynamics of a face and the possibility of being off angle, we can go 15 degrees one way and 15 degrees the other way. But the moment we go beyond 15 degrees off dead center, we lose our accuracy. Not terribly, it doesn't fall off the cliff, but we need a pretty good shot of a face to get a good probabilistic match. And so facial recognition isn't deterministic. We don't say this is Fletch 100% or this is not Fletch. We say we have an 86% certainty that the person in the database matches the person in live space. And that's how facial recognition is growing up. But the good news is, because it's artificial and machine learning, it gets smarter and smarter and smarter as it builds its own inference logic on top of itself. And that's sort of geeky, but what it means is it gets smarter.
So that's the big scary part of AI. So what words of wisdom do you have to convince me that Terminator's not coming tomorrow?
I ignore the scary parts of it. We're not approaching, what do they call it, the singularity? Both Elon Musk and I agree that that the robots are not taking over. Well, they lack the creativity, they lack the speed, but they do some things better than us. And so in the facial recognition domain, one of the things we encourage our clients to do, we're not rendering decision making to facial recognition. We're not giving up that autonomy. We're just providing operators with more context. We're overwhelming operators with too many cameras to look at. And it's an impossibility. It's a mathematical impossibility. So we're providing middleware, if you will, to provide some decision-making support.
You know what? That's the same line that I use. You know, when a 911 caller is waiting for a call taker to answer, there could be a gunshot that you detected.
Yeah.
And when the call taker does answer, no one's there. But if they had an indication that a gunshot had been detected, it gives them context about that. So, you know, AI in the right dosage, I think, is very well. Last question for Frank. What's the next evolution of the RapidSOS additional data payload? I mean, where is that going?
That's an excellent question, Mark. RapidSOS solved the problem of cellular location and calls in motion for PSAPs and first responders. Our next campaign and our next mission is to be able to provide more context and more additional data. So as an example, on the iPhone, there's a heart-shaped icon that if you click on that icon, you can fill out, or you're opting in to, you can put in your name, your blood type, your medications, your emergency contacts. So you're opting in to share that data with first responders. So on your phone, if you dial 911, we will provide that data with your permission to first responders. Imagine the power if you're a diabetic, and let's say you're going unresponsive, or a child with an allergy. If they dial 911, imagine the power of the first responders having that data within seconds of the child hitting 911. Very, very powerful technologies. There's a lot of IoT data out there that we can capture in the system, as well as other types of data that will assist first responders with helping to save more lives.
No, excellent, excellent. All right. Well, you know, that about wraps it up today. I know we were scheduled for an hour and a half, but I wanted to give people time to block their calendar so they don't get distracted. We've got a million things going on. So I'm going to give you 30 minutes or 29 minutes back of your day. And it is lunchtime on the East Coast, so people on the East Coast can go have lunch. Next steps for this, if people need more information, Cody, where can we go for more info on this?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Fletch. So please reach out to us. We will be following up shortly after this webinar and including contact information within that follow-up. We'd love to schedule a free assessment of your facilities and see how these technologies can integrate with what is in place today as well as where you're heading in the future. So please reach out to us. Like I said, we will be following up with contact information here shortly after this webinar closes out. And we welcome any opportunity to speak with each and every one of you individually after this.
Excellent. Thank you very, very much. Very informative, gentlemen. I found this to be incredibly informative myself, and I know the technology. So again, this webinar is recorded, and the playback will be available. You'll get that link in our thank you email to you. So Cody Grand Prix, National Account Manager with 911 Inform. Jay Hutton. Jay, what's your title over at VSBLTY?
I'm the CEO.
You're the head dude. I figured as much. Thank you very, very much. Thanks for bringing your technology front and forward for the good, and not just keeping the pod bay doors closed, Hal. But and Frank Millis, Paradigm, thanks very much for bringing this all together and providing the integration levels with the RapidSOS network. Gentlemen, absolutely excellent webinar. I'm sure that we got a lot of great information out to the folks. So with that, I'll give everybody 26 minutes of their day back. Thank you for joining us, and watch for the next one.